Welcome to the Kawartha Small Business Podcast, where we believe the Kawarthas can be the most thriving region in Canada for small business. I am Brian Rump from Profit Coach.
And I'm Matt Garrity of Matty G Digital.
Alrighty, Matt, today we are doing a wrap up on 2021. It's the last week of the year for the podcast. We're between Christmas and New Year's when this one airs, so we thought we'd do a timely one, lighthearted episode. Nothing too serious. People are enjoying or should be enjoying some time with their families. And thought we'd do a roundup of some of our thoughts on 2021.
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night, not because of this podcast, because as anyone that might even listen knows, I don't pay attention or prepare for these. I feel like I probably should have prepared a bit more for this one. But I actually was fun enough, like thinking about this last night. And you're the one that always says, I hope I get this right, but I hope that I look back on myself from like a year ago and I hate myself from a year ago. Is that what you say? You know what I'm getting
They're
at?
just embarrassed or just see how I've grown. Yeah.
Yes. So I was thinking about this last night, and a year ago at this time compared to where I am now, holy, so embarrassed of last year, so embarrassed on how I was running things with my business, so embarrassed how I was managing projects. I went into January of 2021 with the yearly goal to be figure out and find a project management software. And then I basically fell into Asana in the first month and got obsessed with it and rolled everything out in about 30 to 60 days. And I still think about it, like I said yesterday, on like how much that move, like just over $100 a month that I pay for now. And it was a lot of resources and like energy and mental capacity and everything, but just how much that little change has greatly changed me, my businesses, the people that I work with, like colleagues, the contractors, the vendors, and stuff. A complete world of a difference. I actually don't really understand how we made it and survived before the project management software came around. Like we were just constantly chaos. And like a friend of mine, colleague that I've worked with from not day one, but like the first person I ever worked with, Kristen, we used to just, I can't always remember it, but it was like every day she'd be texting me or I'd be texting her. She'd be like, what's going on with this? What's this? Are we doing this again? Is this the same as last month? What are we doing this month? It was just constant. And I don't know if or when we realized there's got to be a better way, like the infomercial. I don't know when that happened, but then I look back on it at some point this year too, where both of us kind of realized we're wondering like, are we okay with each other? Meaning like her and I wouldn't talk anymore because we went from talking all the time, constant chaos, to I wouldn't hear from her for, I want to say weeks, but that's not true. But I wouldn't hear from her every day. Or if we were chatting, it would be a random like note or anecdote or something. It wasn't like, what am I doing? I have no idea what's happening. I remember one point, like I joked with her, I'm like, are we friends anymore? Like we don't even talk anymore. And she was like, I was thinking the same thing. Like, how did we survive? Like, what did we do before? And it's funny, this little change that's come in. And I wonder about the new people that I work with because like it's still not perfectly smooth ever. It's never going to be perfectly smooth. I think that's probably something inexperienced people have to learn. But I wonder how they think the processes work now with this project management software because I think sometimes like there's a learning curve with it and then they probably like, oh, this is stupid, I don't like this isn't working. I almost want to say to them because I'm not like this, but like you should have seen how it used to be, and this is like a different world.
Oh, yeah. I think sometimes you can get spoiled. Like, just jumping in with something that is working well and you haven't experienced the chaos. But I think experiencing the chaos makes you better when you do have the right tools and understand them, and you just value that more. I love that you just jumped in and talked for several minutes on project management, and just what a big change that was for you, and how that was like one of the things that have influenced like a year where you look back and are embarrassed about where you were. And like when we record this, the 2022 version of this episode next year, like just imagine how, what that looks like to be embarrassed by what we're doing right now. And that to me is like the coolest feeling to think about. It's like, what am I doing today that I'm going to be embarrassed by 6 months or 12 months or 5 years from now?
Yeah. It's interesting to think that it was the biggest influence. I hate admitting this, was you, and the fact that you introduced me to the Who Not How book by Dan Sullivan. And I remember around like December, January, telling everyone about it. I think a few people bought it, like a handful of people I could kind of name that that ended up buying it. But that was the book that made me realize I need to pay more attention to who's. So people that are experts or frankly want to be experts at what they do. Maybe we don't talk enough about that, but I spent a lot of time thinking about that. That meant project management software. That meant finding new people to work with and focusing on what we were good at. I now work with probably, I'm trying to think, 5 or 6, maybe more, 8 different colleagues and contractors that I didn't know in 2020 either, which I think is super cool. And these people are incredibly important parts of the team. They're on their own doing their own thing as contractors and freelancers, but they're so important how this operates that I was thinking about this an hour ago and even like the last couple of days, and like, this team is really good, but they're going to go in different directions because that's how this works, right? We kind of I hope that the people that I work with and that I mentor, and whether or not they're listening or not, but I hope that they get to the point, and I tell them this, that they're as big or bigger than me, and not from an ego perspective. Not that I think I'm the biggest, but I want them to be good marketers and successful, and I want them running their own Matty G digitals locally, right? It's going to happen. I've worked with 2, 3, 4, I want to say close to 6 people in the last year that when I first started working with them, they were employed, and they've all left based on some stuff that I've introduced them to, some work that we've done together, et cetera. Like, that's exciting. And I want them to get bigger than that. I want them to go out on their own, be even more successful. So this, I don't know, I'm fully rambling in like a retrospect from this year, but it started with you. It started with you introducing Who Not How. It started by me recognizing I need to work with other experts or people that want to be experts in that field. It started by me focusing my attention on what do I bring value to. And I take a lot of pride in, I've focused a ton of attention on that. And anytime I'm doing something for, I feel like more than a minute, I would ask myself, why am I doing this? Do I have to do this? Who can I find that can do this for me? And I used to think that I was lazy. I used to think I was the lazy business owner. I would call myself that in conversations. I don't think that that's true anymore, though. I think I'm just extremely critical and thoughtful and strategic with what I do, and I spend my time on it. And that's how I've gotten to where I am today at the end of this year.
Yeah, and I think the word lazy is like, we use it poorly, I think. And I don't know that people, some people are generally lazy. Some people just haven't figured out their strengths yet. And you don't have to force yourself to do things you're not good at or don't really want to do. There's some times where you have to do that, obviously, in any business, but there's always someone better at it. than you. And that's part of building the business. And Who Not How is such a powerful book. It was so good that they wrote another next one that Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy, who's the writing partner on that, called The Gap and the Gain, which is kind of a cool concept as well. And, most people measure themselves in what he calls the gap, which is against your ideals. And everyone feels like they're a failure a bit. So it'd be like looking back at 2021 and thinking, oh, I had these goals for myself and I didn't meet them. And here's all the things that, sucked. And the gain is measuring yourself against where you were at that time, moving towards, those ideals and plans. And I think you just gave a master class in the gain, which I think is a huge strength of you as an entrepreneur, is you live in the gain a lot and like getting better at stuff versus, setting those big long-term goals and then, kicking yourself for not meeting them, which is what a lot of people do over the course of a year or whatever they're working on.
Yeah, for sure. What was your biggest takeaway from this year?
I think for me, this is maybe be a bit open, is I felt like it's a lost year in some ways. And I think that's me living in the gap a little bit because, I think I had a very aggressive plan. I think I always have sort of aggressive plans in my mind and things I want to do. And then I tackle a lot of things. And sometimes it feels like I'm failing at all of them. Or you're like not quite getting where you want and it's frustrating. But then when I force myself to look at the gain, it's great. Like in some ways, I don't even remember the year. It feels like a blur. It feels like it's been on pause. It feels like I didn't really accomplish or do anything. But then when I actually like list out the things that I've done, it's amazing. When I do the math on like an income revenue perspective, it's my best year ever, which almost doesn't feel true. But that's also why you need to take these times to like look back at a year or a period of time and go through and do that, because like it doesn't feel amazing. But when I sort of stack up the things I've learned, the projects I've been on, I have some customers who have like taken massive growth and sort of leaps and bounds. Like that's pretty awesome. I became the certified story brand guide, which I think is just at sort of beginning of its potential, and sort of connections I've made there and the projects that I've done with that have been amazing. So there's like all sorts of like cool stuff that's happening. Yet for some reason, I feel like it's been sort of a mediocre year that sort of like didn't happen in some ways.
Yeah. And that's a pretty good summary of it. And I don't know how transparent you want to be, but I think I've seen a lot stuff progressing for you in the last 30 days, 45 days specifically. You are incredibly insecure about your growth in general. So like you're very critical. You don't think that you're progressing. I think you got your hands in a lot of cool things this year, things that will push you forward. Without getting too many details, I think the stuff that's happened in the last 30 days will help you transition and move forward in your path and all the other things that you're doing into next year, though.
Oh yeah, I think so. And I think too, I am hard on myself, but I also am not afraid to tackle really hard problems sometimes, or like obscure type problems, which I think is a huge strength. And I forget that a lot of people like won't even go there on certain types of projects, and sometimes they don't work out because a lot of things fail in life. And sometimes they do work out eventually, or they work out differently than maybe you want to, but they do work out. So it's just working within that ambiguity and like embracing that, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to think what next year's episode will be talking about, like what the biggest influence of the year will be. I think it's going to be, for me, the Donald Miller stuff that you again have introduced me to. And I don't know if it's going to be Story Brand or Business Made Simple, or does it matter? Just it's Donald Miller in general. And then also, not to pump my own tires, but I'm super curious to see what next year looks like at the end of the year, with a good chunk of the year with Thrive under our belt and live. That could be just Pandora's box of opportunity, in my opinion.
Oh,
I'm
I think
extremely
so.
interested to see that. So
I'm very excited about that because I know recently, I think as we were recording this, like I just coached my first Story Brand workshop with the Story Brand team in sort of a soft, and like the whole time I'm like, man, this will be so awesome if we can do it at Thrive with, we can have 8 people per group at most. Usually it's, 6 is a nice number, but they do that workshop, I think 4 or 5 times a year. And like to be able to run through that with, the right business owners who want to invest a couple of days going through that, like the successes are just crazy on that sort of framework and that mindset. And that's just the sort of tip of the iceberg of like the Donald Miller content stuff that we have sort of access to replicate with people. And I think Thrive will be a hub for that. I know you have a million ideas. I have like a million ideas for like things we could do there as well. I'm working with Greg Evans, and we're doing some pretty cool growth type stuff. Like I think a lot's coming together for like a massive year for 2022.
yeah. How much do you think COVID slowed down a lot of your year?
I think for me, mentally it slowed it down because we had shutdowns. I sort of introverted and will sort of stay shut down, and I thrive better when I am maybe pulled to do more meetings in person or just action happening. Um, in some ways, I say that. In other ways, I think it was an opportunity because I look at specifically my teaching at Fleming. I didn't teach in the fall semester, but I taught in the spring and the summer. And being remote helped me do other things as well versus just teaching. So it's really hard, actually. Like I'll let myself sort of get in the gap a little bit. I think I'm getting better at putting myself in sort of the gain and like not being as hard on myself. Because again, I will sometimes prepare myself or compare myself to someone I'm not and will never be. And I think these mental frameworks and the discipline to apply them myself and on myself are really helpful. Because I think, again, long term helps me isolate those things where maybe I'm too hard on myself. And it's like, why am I too hard on myself? Like, it's kind of a who, not how type of thing. Or like, okay, well, don't do that project then. Like, there's lots of projects around that I would be good at. I just need to market and find them. Like, I'm great at diving into obscure projects or with people who can't find like an easy answer. So like, I just have to find more of those things to work on.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about like how or why we are hard on ourselves, and how are we measuring ourselves, and we reflect back and we're like, oh, it was a good year, it was a bad year. What does that even mean? Also, was it good? Was it bad? By whose standards? Like, who's setting that? Why are we so hard on ourselves? Yeah, like we compare ourselves to others, but what does that matter? There's so much going on that we don't know about that's irrelevant to us. And why would we want to compare us? Like, why would we want to be that other person? It's fascinating as a business owner. And sometimes I maybe shouldn't confess this, but it would be nice to just be able to punch the clock and like 9 to 5. I don't have to worry about this stuff. I work, I come home, that's it.
Yeah. It's hard though, because I think some people are wired just to care more or want to do that. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. I've had jobs like that, and like you like can't turn it off, or you're like worry about other things that you could contribute in that place or whatever. Yeah, and that's really hard to do. I think what's important here, I think, is the mindset stuff and the making sure you're like choosing to be either happy about a year. I think just generally, this year it's been that looming feeling, and I don't know if that's a COVID thing where I have to try harder to pull myself out of the gap. But one of the things I don't like is sometimes this time of year around New Year's, people will be saying like, oh, F you 2021, you were the worst. Can't wait for next year. And I never try to take that attitude. Because even though it is like a maybe tougher time mentally, or just there's extra stress and uncertainty, a lot of good still's happening. And like it's all feeding into a brighter future. Like I don't want to be the guy who just hates everything and like knows you don't have the power to change it.
You do have the power. And this is a different podcast altogether. This is not the Core of the Small Business podcast and what we talk about, because it sounds a little bit hustle bro. But you can change it. You can be in control, for the most part, of your mind, your thoughts, your life, the direction that you're going. It's up to you to decide, like, what do you ultimately want from this? And my wife said to me recently, she's been proud of me that I recognize that there's things that I am happy or unhappy about, and I actually act on them, which I think does set me apart from other people. And that's a conscious thing that I actively think about, where I grew up thinking, why are we unhappy about this? Or why are we continuing to be unhappy about a situation when there's a lot of alternatives here? Is it scary?
Oh yeah.
Are the alternatives scary? Yeah, absolutely. But every tough decision is scary. And everyone's been in them. There's like a life-changing decision doesn't come easily. Everyone's situation is unique, but also it's all the same. We're all humans. We all have friends. We all have family. We all have responsibilities. So everyone that's taken that leap to make a change in their life, like we've all been there, and like we just make the most of it.
Oh yeah, and I think this is definitely a small business conversation because everyone's in it, and we have an episode coming up sort of to help specifically address it. But it is a choice, and you could design your business for your life. You can make those decisions. If you are, feeling stuck, and again, sometimes it's just irrational. Like I think for me, some of my gap stuff is irrational, and I just have to pull myself out of that headspace and understand that. And I hate to think about where I would be if I didn't do that, or if I didn't take that time to do some of that stuff. But if you don't like what you got, why don't you change it? As Trooper would say, great Canadian band, which is I often quote in small business, because you do have the power to change those things, and it's not always easy. Or you need a who, not a how. It could be hard to find that who, but like that's why coaches exist, other people who can help you with that. Like we want to help businesses with those types of decisions sometimes, but it is about those decisions, the forward progress, improving, understanding that you're not going to like just be an overnight success right away. And the people you do see who look like overnight successes usually are like 5 to 10 years in of like grinding through the mud and nothing working out. And then all of a sudden it starts working for them and it looks like it's been easy. But like, that's why you need to do like this episode and look back on a year and like really maybe digest what happened, look at what your goals were. I think you talked about, you write stuff down a year ago and then you like revisit like, hey, look what I wrote down then, and it's going to be way different. But there's a lot of like good stuff that's happening, especially, and I think it's more important if you are aggressively trying to grow and do lots of things and take on a lot. Like you just need to take that time to look back on it.
Yeah. I don't want to add anything because that feels like the perfect end cap to the year.
Perfect end cap. Look at that. We are in the game on that. Just think of how better our episodes are this year versus last year. And I promise our listeners that we will just get better. And hopefully, we will, a year from now, be embarrassed at some of these topics or quality of podcasts. So, hopefully, everyone has had a great year. If you haven't, don't feel like you've had a great year, you probably have. So, take some time to rack up, the wins and just think about all the gains you have. If you want our help doing that, we'd love to sit down with you and help you figure out all those gains. Check us out at kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca or just send us an email to set it up at kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca.